Have you ever looked around your home and realized you're not holding on to stuff? It's holding on to you. Boxes of mementos, old photos, keepsakes, things you can't get rid of, even if they're taking up space in your life. Not because you need it, not because you use it, but because it means something. Today, we're talking about something deeper than clutter. We're talking about the heart stuff, Heart. If you've ever struggled to let go of sentimental items, this one is for you. So here's where we start. It's not just a box of old letters or a china cabinet gathering dust. It's a piece of your soul. When we talk about what I call the heart stuff, we're talking about the things in your home that carry memory, identity, and love. And I want to say this right up front. That's not clutter. That's your past, your history, who you were, who you are, who you wished you had been. And it deserves to be addressed with grace. If we haven't met before, I'm Mary. And with my co-creator, Adrian, we've spent the past 5 years building an online community where women come together to share tips on home organization, productivity, and life hacks. Here you'll find warm conversations and practical solutions to help make your life a lot easier and a lot more enjoyable. After helping hundreds of women, we were excited to expand to YouTube to share our content with a wider audience. So grab a cup of whatever you love, settle in, and let's start creating our best lives together, one week at a time. And as always, please help us in our journey by hitting the like, subscribe, and share buttons. Okay, so let's get started. If you're here, you've probably felt the weight of it. Maybe you're standing in front of a closet full of your mom's clothes that she wore, or you've got a shelf of books your dad collected, or maybe it's smaller, a jewelry box full of brooches, a photo album, a quilt, and somewhere in your mind a voice is saying, I cannot let this go. What is going to happen if I do? What does this mean if I do? Well, that's the question we're answering today. Because here's what I've learned from working with families going through transitions. We're making it harder to create new memories because the past is taking up all the space, literally and emotionally. Something is going to have to give. And it doesn't have to be your relationship with the person or the memory. It just has to be the thing. Today we're going to walk through why you hold on, how our minds are wired to keep things, and then, and this is the important part, how to have a conversation about all of this with your family. And the conversation goes two ways. Adults to their adult children, or parents to their adult children, and adult children to their parents. And the goal isn't to feel bad about loving your family or even loving your items. The goal is to figure out which pieces of your past deserve a permanent home in your present. There's a whole psychology around sentimental items. So let's talk about why we hold on to them and why it's so hard to let go. And I mean really hard. Not that surface, oh, I'm just a sentimental gal kind of hard. The kind that keeps you up at night. Well, first of all, we're all hardwired for this. And I'm not being poetic. I mean biology. Our brains evolved when scarcity was real. If you had something, you kept it. Back in the cave times, you hung on to the foods you could find, the berries, you hung on to the rocks to serve as weapons, you hung on and fought for the cave that kept you safe at night. Because you didn't know when you'd find another one, whether it was food or clothing. So our ancestors have developed this drive to hold on to what we have. It might keep you alive later. And that instinct is still in our nervous systems. Now, you might have more stuff than you could ever need. I have more stuff than I could ever need, but our brains don't know that. It still will keep saying, that old reptilian brain in the back of your head, it will say, keep it. You might need it someday, and something bad could happen. Add that to the fact that every single item in your home is not just a thing, it's a prompt. That wedding dress, it isn't just fabric, it's the day you felt beautiful. That coffee mug isn't just ceramic, it's the person who gave it to you and the memory of being together. Your brain connects objects to moments, to people, to versions of yourself. And when you think about letting something go, what you're really thinking about is losing that feeling, that person, that moment. So guilt moves in. And this is the big one. The number one reason we keep the heart stuff is guilt. We feel like if we get rid of something, we're betraying the person who gave it to us or the person we were when we owned it. It feels like a rejection of that loved one. And this guilt is so heavy that it really, honestly, we would rather keep a whole box of ticket stubs and playbills than face the guilt of letting it go. And then there is also the fear, and the fear underneath the fear. We're all afraid maybe if we give away the item, we'll forget. If we don't have grandma's apron, will I forget what her hands looked like? Will I forget making cookies with her? Will I forget what her laugh was like? And the answer is absolutely not. But your brain is scared of that anyway. You have to remember our memories live in us, not in objects. But let's be honest, knowing that intellectually and feeling that emotionally are two very different things. And finally, there's what I call the fantasy air. So we've talked about guilt, we've talked about fear, and now we've got the fantasy air, HEIR. You're holding on to these items for someone else, a child who might want them, or maybe a grandchild who might want them, a future version of yourself, a relative who should appreciate this. But here's the truth, they probably don't, and they probably won't. You're storing their future for them, taking up your present in the process. You're making space for a decision they never asked you to make. When you put all of these things together, that's why the closet is full. That's why the basement has boxes. That's why you haven't opened that cabinet in 5 years. That's why we can't bring ourselves to empty it. We're not being sentimental, we're being protective. Let's redefine the whole connection that we are not our things. Now, I do want to pause here and say something that might feel a little uncomfortable, but I promise you it's going to help. Your love for someone is not stored in their things, and your love for yourself, for who we are, for who you are, for who you've become, for who I've become, it doesn't live in a box in the basement or the attic. And that is the hardest shift to make because it feels like a betrayal to even think about it. But let me ask you this. If you gave away your mom's recipe collection, would you stop being her daughter? If you donated those college textbooks, would you stop being educated? If you passed along your wedding dress, would you stop being married? Well, the answer to all of those is no. The connection is within us. It's what you've learned from her, in the knowledge you've gained, in the commitment you made. The object is just an anchor. And sometimes, well, sometimes a lot of the time, it's really holding us underwater instead of keeping us afloat. So here's what happens when we conflate the item with the person or the moment. We give the item power it was never supposed to have. We make it responsible for our memories, our identity, our love, and that is unfair to you and me, and it's unfair to the object. A sweater cannot carry a weight of a relationship with someone. A china set won't prove that You're a good daughter or I'm a good daughter. A stack of old photos can't be the only place your memories live. The guilt you feel, the voice saying, I can't let this go, it's often not actually about the thing, it's about the belief underneath. If I keep this, they'll know I love them. If I let it go, I'm saying that they didn't matter. But that is a lie. It's a lie that your fear is telling you. And you know this is a lie because you've probably already let go of many, many, many items. You've thrown out junk mail without guilt. You've donated items without feeling like you were rejecting someone. But the moment something has an emotional weight, the guilt shows up. So what changes? We have to separate the feelings from the object. The memories live in our hearts and our minds. The person lives in how we treat people, in the values they taught us, in the inside jokes that we still laugh about. Those are the real heirlooms. Those are what we actually pass down to the next generation. Not the items, but the stories, the lessons, the love. When you keep something because you're afraid of forgetting, you're actually keeping it for the wrong reason. You're keeping it out of fear instead of out of love. And that fear gets heavier every single day. Every time you walk past it, you feel a little guilty. Every time you dust around the object, you may feel a little sad or even a little resentful. The item stops being a source of comfort and becomes a source of weight. And here's what I want you to consider. What if letting go of the object actually deepened your connection to the person or memory? What if by releasing something that you kept out of obligation, you made room to honor what you actually love? What if the real way to celebrate someone is not to store their belongings, but to live the life they would have wanted for you? Our love doesn't need proof. Your love doesn't need proof. Our memories don't need props. And we don't need permission to let go. Now, one of the important aspects is the conversation, also known as the legacy conversation. And this is, again, goes two ways, from the parents to their adult children and adult children to the parents. But a couple of things can happen. Sometimes when we have that conversation, the parents' values will clash with the child's boundaries. So let's talk about the part that keeps most people stuck. The guilt that shows up when family is involved. And it's not simple guilt. It's a collision between two completely different perspectives on what things mean. And here's what I've also learned from talking with families going through things. Your parents' stuff, adult children remember this, your parents' stuff is not just stuff to them. A lot of times, those items are woven into their identity. Your mom's china set isn't just dishes. It's proof that she was a good hostess or is a good hostess, that she cared about beauty, that she had a home worth gathering around. Your dad's collection of tools, they're not just tools. It's evidence that he was capable, that he knew how to fix things, that he was useful. These items are how they've told the story of who they are or who they were. And then we come along, we're their kids. We grew up with those things in the house, but we didn't grow up needing them to define the way they do. You know your mom's value without needing her dishes. You know your dad's capabilities without needing his tools. We love them regardless. We just don't need their items to prove it. Part of this is the generational divide, and here's something that really matters. Your parents grew up in a completely different world than what we did. And I just don't mean they had different music or different fashion. I mean they were shaped by totally different economic realities, social norms, and those realities shaped how they think about owning things. Let me break this down. I'm going to break this down into the different generations. So I find this really, really interesting. The silent generation who were born between 1928 and 1945, that was my parents. They were older parents when I was born. But if your parents or grandparents were born in maybe the late 20s or the 1930s, they grew up during the Depression. This is important. Their parents, our great grandparents, in my case, my parents, lived through true scarcity. No money, no jobs, no safety nets, no social programs. As my grandmother used to say, use it up, wear it out, make it do, or do without. You kept things because you didn't know when you'd get another one, and it was real. I mean, if anybody studied the Great Depression, jobs were there one day and gone the next. The whole Dust Bowl, it blew away overnight. People were desperate for just basics, a safe and secure place to live, food, anything. I mean, clothes were repaired and repaired and repaired. Everything was repaired, renewed, reused, repurposed. So the silent generation grew up watching this. They learned early, waste nothing, ever. Everything could be used again. A jar could be washed and reused. Clothes were mended, not thrown out. If something broke, you fixed it. If you couldn't fix it, you found another use for it. And that wasn't being cheap. That was surviving. Now, and also think about it. They were kids during the Depression and then adults during World War II, which again, you had rationing and scarcity. So when they could finally buy those items were built to last. A coat was made to last for decades. A piece of furniture was built by someone who expected it to be in the house for 30 or 40 years. Tools were solid, dishes were thick, they were ceramic or really good china. They were meant for real use, not for decoration. Quality mattered because replacing things wasn't an option. And they saved up to buy these things. Credit was not in the picture. They didn't buy on credit. They would save and they would plan. You worked, you saved, then you went to the store and you bought what you could afford. And when you finally had enough money to get something, it meant something. It represented months of work and sacrifice. So when our silent generation parent holds on to something, they're not just holding on to an object. They're holding on to the proof that they made it, that they survived, that they were capable of building a life and keeping it safe. When you ask them to let it go, it can feel like you're asking them to erase that survival story. Think about it. They grew up during the Depression, and then they were adults during World War II, which, like I said, had rationing and scarcity for another 5 years until 1946. Then you come to the baby boomers, born from 1946 to 1954. Now, the baby boomers, they were born right after World War II when everything changed. The economy boomed. Jobs were plentiful. The GIs went back to college and got an education on the GI Bill. And for the first time, ordinary people could buy new things, not used things, not repaired things, new things, shiny things, things that represented hope and progress and a new era. Boomers grew up in a time of true abundance. Where their parents had rationing and scarcity, boomers had plenty. They were the first generation to grow up really around mass manufacturing. The, the new homes built post-war had the refrigerator, the stove, cars with all the fabulous colors, TVs. They were the first generation to grow up surrounded by mass manufacturing and also TV. TV was starting to come in, and with television came advertisements, the soap or the detergent or the food or whatever. Advertisements were very plentiful, along also with magazines were becoming very popular in catalogs. You had Montgomery Ward, you had J.C. Penney, you had Ladies' Home Journal, Red Book, Women's Day, all of the magazines touting what you needed to be a modern housekeeper, a modern woman post-war living in a modern house. So we had the new appliances, the new cars, television, suburban homes. They didn't have to mend things because new things were cheaper and available. You could go to the store and buy more than one dress. And here's the thing. Owning things became tied to identity. If you had a nice house, a nice car, nice furniture, it said you were successful, that you had made it. You'd pulled yourself up from the Depression era, through the war, and into the modern world. Things were proof of your status and your worth. And boomers also grew up where credit was coming, not credit cards, but credit was becoming a little more normal. You would have layaway programs where you could, buy now and put down a certain amount of money and pay a certain amount of money every week. So you didn't have to save up anymore. And you could, as I said, buy now and pay later. You could own things immediately, not eventually. And that really changed everything about the relationship to buying. So boomers accumulated. They built collections. They bought the good china and the nice furniture because these things said something about who they were. They said, I'm a person who has a beautiful home. I'm a person who can provide. I'm a person who's successful. And they kept those things, sometimes in boxes, sometimes unused, because the things themselves held the story of their success. And then along came Generation X, which is the bridge between the boomers and the millennials. And Generation X was very, very different. They were born between 1965 and 1980. And they really grew up watching their boomer parents accumulate and have this financial success. And then they watched a lot of the marriages end. You have to remember that this was the era when divorce became very, very common and very normal. And what did this mean? It meant moving, packing up the house, maybe going to a smaller house or an apartment. And suddenly, the stuff that represented identity was just stuff packed in boxes. Generation Xers are also very independent and much more skeptical. They didn't buy the American dream the same way their parents did, but think about it economically. When they were growing up, we had the huge oil recession in the early 70s. We had the second recession in the 80s. We had the housing market failure. There was a lot of up and down in the economy. I mean, dad could lose his job overnight. Mom could lose her job overnight through no fault of their own, just the volatility of the economy. So they really are a little more skeptical about the American dream. And they knew that owning things didn't actually make you happy, but they were saturated. Gen X, first true TV generation. Saturday morning cartoons with the cereal, hey, Mikey likes it. Remember with the cereal advertisements coming on and the cool clothes advertisements and music. I mean, it was the TV generation. Catalogs. And this is also when the Kmarts and the Walmarts, Montgomery Wards, they were all starting to become bigger and bigger and bigger. That meant it was easier to get items. Items were very expendable. You could buy a cheap version of something rather than a table that was going to last 40 years. And Gen X also started valuing experiences. Travel, rather than being a once in a lifetime adventure to go overseas, travel became very, very, very normal. Learning, doing, not having. They wanted good memories that were worth more than a good couch. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a generational difference. So their approach to money was also very different. They were more cautious about credit. They were getting credit cards, but they saw the debt that their parents had, and they really, really, really were concerned. They didn't think that owning more stuff meant you were more successful. This was almost lucky generation in that they had not experienced scarcity. They experienced abundance from the beginning until the economy started fluctuating in the 70s and 80s. And they thought that owning less might actually mean that you were maybe a little freer. Now, the millennials, born somewhere between 1981 and 2000, that shift was complete, and it's fascinating. That was the first generation to grow up with the internet. Everything was instant. Information is instant. You didn't need to own records to listen to music. You didn't need to own You didn't need to go to the movies to watch movies. This is fast fashion and fast furniture. IKEA was coming into fashion. You could own a very inexpensive table. Target, all the big boxes, Target, Home Goods, Ross's, TJ Maxx, they were starting to really build and boom. This means that you could change out a sofa seasonally if you wanted, pillows, pillowcases, art. Everything was mass produced and very affordable. So they grew up in that whole digital age where you could access everything without owning it, and you didn't need to spend a fortune to have all the stuff you needed. They also grew up moving a lot. Their parents downsized, they would move for their jobs. Remember, with the upheaval of the economy, they moved for schools or jobs or relationships. And let me tell you, moving stuff is exhausting. I've moved 5 miles, I've moved 5,000 miles. Moving is tough and it's very expensive and it's limiting. So, a lot of what they learned was travel light, that experiences were what mattered. Travel, time with friends, learning, growing, not necessarily accumulating. Because remember, it was easy come, easy to go. Credit was easy, instantaneous satisfaction. You don't like this table, you put it on for sale in the yard sale and buy another one that cost you $15. They also grew up more and more. The environmental consciousness movement was very active, and they really realized that some of this stuff would mean that it was buying so much also meant a huge amount of waste, and that consumption does have a cost. And maybe the owning less was actually the responsible choice as well as the practical one. And their relationship to credit and buying was also completely different. Like I said, they grew up with instant gratification. You can get anything delivered to your door. This is, Amazon was taken off. Now we don't even need to leave our house. Everything from the a bed to cat chow will show up at your door if you order it, and usually the next day. But they also grew up seeing the huge housing crisis of 2008, and they saw that what debt can happen. You can lose your house overnight. They saw their parents and grandparents lose their homes, and they got very skeptical on having things on credit. And they learned to ask more and more, do I really need this or do I just think I need this? And that's why the gap exists. So when your silent generation parents or grandparents or your boomer grandparents or grandparents parents or grandparents look at their china set, they see decades of hosting family gatherings, of being someone who had a beautiful home. They see proof that they made it. When the other generations start looking at it, they see a box that needs to live somewhere. And those aren't compatible views. And that's okay. There's not a right view and a wrong view, but that is where the gap happens. The importance of an item or an object does not necessarily travel down from the generations the way people hope it will. And what meant everything to somebody can feel like just a box of stuff or almost a burden, an obligation to another generation. And that's not a failure on either side. It's just the way it works. And once you realize that, that helps tremendously when you realize where your parents and grandparents are coming from. It helps tremendously in understanding and helping with the process of letting some of these go. So here's what I want you to understand. If your parent is holding on to something because it's tied to their identity, their current identity, their past identity, to their survival story, to their success story, they're probably afraid. They're afraid if they let it go, part of who they are goes away. And if you're trying to let go of something that your parent gave you, you might be afraid too. Afraid it means that you're somehow rejecting them or that you're losing a piece of your own history. And both fears are real. Neither one means someone doesn't love the other. It just means you're both trying to protect something that feels fragile. So let's talk about how you actually start the conversation. Here's what needs to happen. I want everybody to start the conversation early on both sides, not when people are drowning in boxes and feeling desperate and don't know what to do next, but when our parents, and this is to you adult kids, when your parents are here, healthy, and thinking clearly. And if you're an adult child, here's how to begin this. I want you to find a really nice, pleasant, calm moment, maybe over a cup of coffee, not when you're stressed or rushed. I want you to really be present. And you might say something like, you know what, I've been thinking about something and I want to ask you about it because I respect you. I want your opinion. And as I think about my own life in my own home, I'm realizing I really need to start making some choices about what I keep. But before I do, I want to understand what matters to you, not to pressure you, but because I want to honor the things that actually mean something to you. And then I want you to listen, really, really, really listen to what your parents have to say. Because a lot of the time, they're keeping something because they think you might want it or the grandkids want it. They're not actually attached to it. And if you're the parent having this conversation, you might be a little nervous. You might worry that your child is rejecting you or what you've built. So here's what helps. Ask them what they actually want. You could say something like, I've been holding on to a lot of things and I'm starting to wonder if I'm keeping them for the right reasons. I mean, some of it is because I thought you might want it someday. And some of it is because I'm not sure who I am without it, but I want to know what would actually be meaningful to you. Not what I think you should want, but what you actually would treasure. And that question changes everything because it gives them permission to tell the truth. Parents, your adult children will tell you, yes, I would love to have this, or I just don't have room. And the truth is usually, I want to remember you. I want to honor you. I don't need the items to do that. But ask for the story, adult children, not just the stuff. When you have this conversation, what you're really asking in both directions is what legacy do you want to leave me and what legacy do I want you to leave me? Not the objects, but the person you are, the values you had, the way you made me feel. And when you listen to that answer, something shifts because your parents, they're going to tell you about love and hard work and resilience. They're not going to say, I want you to store my china set in your basement. Here's the thing that surprised me when I started having these conversations with families. Most parents don't actually expect their kids to keep everything. They kept everything because they wanted it to be there if their kids wanted it. And when you ask, when you really show interest in the story behind an item instead of just the item, they feel heard. They feel like their life mattered, their history mattered, who they were mattered, who they are matters. So, parents, try this. Instead of asking your adult child, do you want this? Say, you know what? I'd like to tell you the story behind this. Would you like to hear it? And then adult kids, attend to the story. Actually, be interested. Our parents had a whole life before we showed up on this earth, and they had a whole other life once we flew the nest. And there's a lot of interesting aspects to that life, so let them tell you. And then ask them questions. You know, when did you get this? Who does it remind you of? What was going on? What was happening at the time? Why did you decide on this item? Did you imagine anybody using it besides you in the future? Do you see me using it or your grandkids? I mean, sometimes they'll be like, no, I just thought it was cute. And then here's the crucial part on both ends. Adult kids, write it down or record it. We all have phones. Bust out the recorder on there or the videotape and make sure you get the history. You don't need the object if you have the story. And parents, as I said, you can record on your own phone about an item. You can go around and videotape and record. You can put little cards or notes on items. This is the cool stuff. This is the fascinating stuff, is the stories behind the items. And, you know, your adult child may not need your wedding dress if they have the memory of you describing how it felt when you walked down the aisle and who was at the wedding and you know, the flowers and your bridesmaids and your groomsmen. They don't need dad's tools if they know about the projects dad built and how he learned. Maybe he learned from his father. Maybe he was self-taught. The story is the real inheritance. The stuff is just the messenger. I mean, that's what we really want, is the stories. Now, also separating financial value from emotional value. That is a big deal. We need to understand that when something is valuable, it may not mean that it's monetarily valuable, but it has emotional value. A china set worth money is very different from a china set that means something special. Have both conversations, but keep them separate. Someone might have inherited something that's valuable, but they have no emotional connection to, or they might have something with zero resale value that broke their heart to think about parting with it. So money and meaning, they're not equal. If something is genuinely valuable, that's a different conversation. And you might sell it, you might donate it to a museum or local history or a charity. You might pass it to someone who will actually use it and cherish it, but that choice gets to be practical instead of emotional. Here's the bigger move. Help your parents see that you can honor them without keeping their items. Be very clear what you actually do want in order to remember them. I want to remember how you made me feel when I walked into the kitchen. I want to remember the way you laughed. I want to remember that you taught me how to be generous. Then if there's an item that captures that feeling, great, keep it. But you don't need to keep everything as a testament to your love. One wooden spoon that your mom used can represent a lifetime of cooking for you. One book from your dad's collection can represent his intelligence and his curiosity. You don't need all of them. And here's what I want you to know about your side of this. Adult children, you are allowed to want something different than what your parent wants for you. You're allowed to honor your parent and their love without storing all of their belongings. And you're allowed to have that boundary without feeling like you're rejecting your parents or grandparents. If someone pushes back when you're trying to let go, it's okay to be clear. And there's no reason to be mean, just clear. I love you, mom or grandmom, and I am making space in my home and my life. That's not a reflection on you. That's taking care of myself. I know these were very important to you, and I hope we're going to find a really great home for them, but it's not my home. You don't need their permission to do this. You're an adult, remember? Your home is yours to curate. The guilt you're carrying, a lot of it isn't even yours. It's borrowed from someone else's expectations, and you can stop it. But do it with compassion, both for your parents and grandparents and for yourself. Because what you're both trying to do is hold on to love. You're just holding on to it in different ways. Let's talk about the great stuff transfer when something has to move. So you've had the conversation, both the adult children to the parents and the parents to the adult children, and you understand each other a little better. And now comes the practical part. How do you actually move something between generations? Because that's its own kind of emotional work. Now, first understand that transfer is not a rejection. When you pass something to someone else, a sibling, a cousin, a friend, a stranger, you're not saying, I don't want this. You're saying, I think this might be happier with someone else. And I say that to people all the time. Set the item free and let someone else love on it. Living in a closet or a box or under the stairs or up in the attic or down in the basement, this object is not honoring the person. It's not being loved and appreciated the way it should be. That's actually a very loving thing. And here's how to do it really well. Be honest about the condition and the reality. If your mom's china set has a chip in it, say so. If it's been in storage for 10 years and nobody's used it, acknowledge that. Don't dress it up or apologize for it. Just be real. This is beautiful and it meant something to me, but I'm not using it. I think it deserves to be somewhere it'll be loved. When you offer something to someone, give them an out also. Parents, don't make them feel obligated. You might say, I'm not using this anymore. I thought of you, but I also know you might not have space for it or even want it or even like it, and that is fine. I just wanted to ask and give you an opportunity, and then let them decide. And if they say no, don't take it personally. And don't guilt them, please. Just say, I understand. I'll find someone else or somewhere else that will love on it. Because there is somewhere else always. Someone who will want it. It can be donated. It can be recycled. It doesn't have to stay with you just because you're afraid of what it means if it leaves. If someone does want it, help them with the logistics. Pack it up well. Be clear about what it needs. This needs to be hand washed or this is fragile. Give them the story too. Write down what you remember. Take a photo, send them a note. Remember when, dot, 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 dot. Make the transfer about the meaning, not just the moving. And here's the thing nobody talks about. Sometimes it feels sad to let something go, even when you know it's the right choice. That's okay. You can be glad you're making space and still feel a little nostalgic about it. Both things can be true. Honor that feeling. Maybe sit with the item for a minute before it goes. Remember what it meant. Say thank you, then let it go. If you're the one receiving something, try to receive it, and please do receive it with grace. Even if you don't love it or want it long term, in that moment, your parent or relative is giving you something that mattered to them. You're accepting a piece of their story. Even if you eventually pass it on to someone else, that moment of receiving is about that connection. You might say something like, thank you for this. Thank you for trusting me with something that mattered to you. You don't have to promise you'll keep it forever. Just say thank you for the gift and the story. So here's what I want you to do starting today. Pick a few items of your heart stuff and start writing or recording the story or history. And remember this. Letting go of things doesn't mean letting go of people. It doesn't mean forgetting. It means you're choosing what stays with you and you're doing it with intention and love. Your home should be a place where new memories can live, where you can have room to breathe, to grow, to create. Your home should not be a museum to the past, but a home for the present. That's the life you deserve to live. Letting go of heart stuff, it's not about losing your past, it's about choosing your future. Because at the end of the day, your memories live in you, not in a box, not in a closet, not in your attic. I want you to join me next time when we continue our Heart Stuff series. I'll be talking about overcoming the challenges of letting go, including things like emotional roadblocks, resistance, and delayed decisions. So I also want to know in the comments, what's one thing you've held on to that you know you need to let go of? And if this video has shifted your perspective and helped even a little, please hit the like, subscribe, and share. Particularly share this with someone who needs it. So until next time, cheers, everyone.